Hi, this is the second part of Chapter 1 in CCNA3 Scaling Networks. This chapter is about how we can scale or select our network devices, because depending on the size of our network, there are different considerations to take when choosing, for instance, a switch and a router or an access point. Depending on the large our network is going to be and what the plans are for the network. Of course, if I know that this is a very, very small network and it will never expand, well, then I can take that into consideration and choose a fixed configured switch. Instead, if I know that this might scale up, then I'll choose, for instance, a modular switch when I can just put in new modules, or a stackable switch. So there are different considerations. Also, when I buy a switch, I can buy one with 24 ports, I can buy one with 48 ports, depending on how I see the future. And it's always a good idea to be able to scale up. The first consideration is, of course, is the port density. Port density means how many ports do I need, and that could be difficult to know. But it's a good idea to be able to have like the option of adding more ports. And you can add more ports by having a modular switch where you can actually buy, for instance, 24 new ports and put in to your existing switch. Or if it's a stackable switch, then you can just stack one switch on top of the other and connect them with a special cable, and then the switch will actually work as one. So try to find out if I can extend the number of ports. The forwarding rates, find out what you need. Of course, if you buy a new switch today, you will not buy a 10 megabit switch. You will buy typically a gigabit switch. And then you can consider if you want some of the ports to be 10 gigabit, for instance. If you know that this switch is going to be connected to our server farm where all the traffic will go through, well, then it's a good idea to have some port rates that are faster than where all the end devices are connected. Of course, all of these are something to do with the economy, because the more ports, if you buy somewhere some switches where you have 10 gigabit ports, that will also cost you a lot. Another thing you have to consider is if you want to use power over Ethernet, and you would probably like that if you have a wireless network connected, which most people have today. So the power over Ethernet means that, for instance, you can power your access point through the Ethernet ports. So you don't have to, when you install all your access points in your building, you don't have to make sure that the electrical cables are also available for the access point. So you can just plug in the Ethernet port, and then you actually have power that way as well. Of course, you have to buy these things in the switch so that they are able to use power over Ethernet. Another thing is if you want the switch to be able to route. This is called multi-layer switches, which actually means that they are a combined layer 2 and layer 3 switch. Layer 3 means that we will able to route traffic, and that the ports will see them as a routed port within the switch instead of just a normal switch port, which actually just operates on layer 2. So if you, for instance, need to route between your VLANs, you could do that by adding a multi-layer switch in your environment, which is typically both faster and cheaper than buying a router. Then, of course, you have to look at the router requirements. How large a routing network do you need? How is it within the distribution layer, where you need to have different VLANs to be routed, for instance, or is it outside? So depending on where you want to route, or if you want to route to outside, and how to set it up, because within, to route between, as I said, to route between VLANs, it's a good idea to do that in a switch, a layer 3 switch. Whereas if you want to route out to different locations and through the internet connections, then it's probably a routing setup you want. And depending on, of course, here, what kind of routers do you want to buy, the hardware of the routers, also what kind of routing protocols would you like to choose for that purpose. Yeah, and also if you want to, for instance, reduce the broadcast domains, this is why you would like to have a VLANs, of course. And also, if you want to, segment your network, then you will probably, or you will need some kind of layer 3 device between your different segments in your LAN. Yeah, and yes, there are Cisco routers for every purpose. Smaller, larger, cheaper, more expensive ones. So depending on what you need, Cisco have routers for all purposes. Yeah. Of course, the small office routers typically also have, for instance, a built-in switch. It's a router and a switch, and sometimes also a wireless access point in one. Whereas the larger switches, they are only switches. A large core switch, for instance, is typically a module switch, so that you can, add different new ports if you like, and you can change it, and you can change the setup, and it will still. You don't have to change the inside hardware. It's very easy to add new modules. Yeah. And apart from that, when you have the Cisco routers, you also have the possibility to add new functionality by updating your iOS, the operating system in both the routers and the switches. If you for instance, are not going to work with IP version 6, or if you don't have some specific security requirements, then you can choose a smaller operating system. Then if you need more functionality, you can update it to a larger operating system with new functionality. So you can also do it in the software of the different devices. Yeah, you can also think about if you want to, how you want to manage and monitor your devices. Of course, we know that when we are using or connecting to a brand new device and it's empty, in the high-end high-end Cisco products, you have to use this console port to get connected to it. There are some of them that already have a pre-configured web interface that you also can use. Otherwise, when you have set it up for the first time and you have an IP address and everything, you will use that what is called in-band router configuration, where you connect through the Ethernet interface and the IP network. And also, there is actually an opportunity also to use a modem if you want to use the phone lines. I don't think in Denmark that you will use that, but there is the possibility. Yeah. And of course, we have been looking at the different devices and the different commands to set up the basic stuff in a router. To save the configuration, of course, is important. We have seen that we can save it on a TFTP server. We can save it in a text file. We can configure it and reload it again from a text file and everything. It is a very good idea to have a backup copy of your configuration. Some basic show commands you can do. Show IP protocols will show you, for instance, what kind of routing protocols that you're using. Show IP route will show you the routing table. Show interfaces will show you the interfaces and how they are configured. Show IP interfaces is a brief way of showing you interfaces on which IP addresses that are configured. Show IP interface brief is an even briefer one, where you only see the IP addresses and the protocol status, whether it's up and down. Show protocols will show you all the routed protocols that are enabled. Show CDP neighbors if you're using CDP, for instance. I think we have been through most of these. Hope that was the wrong way. Yeah. Show port security. Remember that we could set up port security. We can set a sticky MAC address. We can use show MAC address table, show interfaces. This is typically, of course, on a switch, not on a router. Yeah, and that was it. Thank you.